Hi everybody, I'm Terry Hoknes, comic book historian and collector. Like to help people learn about comics and learn how to invest in them. Today we're going to take a look at some major keys that people usually invest in, but we're going to today use the GP analysis for the last 10 years, and we're going to look and see just how well have some certain key books been over the last 10 years. And did you do well if you had bought these 10 years ago? And we're going to learn from this as we go. So I pulled out about 10 different random key books over the decades, and we're going to use them to do some studying and analyzing what's going on in comic world. Now, many of you know it's been quite crazy last 10 years because we had COVID happen right in the middle. A lot of key books spiked, and that's never really happened before. Now comic prices are coming back and settling down. So the big question with all these keys is, are these books still more valuable than they were before COVID? Have they actually gone up? Or has the COVID effect actually crashed books and these books have turned into bad investments long term? So we're going to find that out. Now, just a reminder, we want to look at the return on investment calculator here. And keep in mind, if you are specifically investing in comic books, are you picking books that are actually winning? Are they going up? Because you can invest in stocks, etc., and play it safe. Now, comic books are way more fun to invest in general, but are you actually profiting? Some people tell me, oh, my book went up $20 this year. And we got to look at, well, what have you paid for that? And how long was it stalled? And is it going to keep going up? Things like that. So let's dive into a few books that I've picked here. And we're going to see what we notice. So usually I use Overstreet Price Guide a lot of times to analyze growth. But today we're just going to use the GP analysis, which has kept track of every CGC graded book sale. So we have comparisons. So why don't we start with Amazing Spider-Man 300. Pretty well the biggest comic book of the last 40 years. Everyone wants the first full appearance of Venom. This book is a major key. And we got Todd McFarlane, of course, and a classic cover. So let's study it a bit. So here's growth on the GP analysis. We can see growth over 20 years here. You can see it was pretty steady, hovering up around 2017. It started to move up. You can see, of course, the huge bump in growth around 2021 to 2023. That's when the COVID marketplace drove prices up. A lot of books tripled in price. But of course, if you sold right then, you made a lot of money. But if you bought right then, you're losing money if you're trying to sell it anytime now. So we're going to compare these prices and see what has happened. So here's a growth year by year of all the copies that have been sold. A lot of copies out there because this book is very easy to find. And so I picked one specific grade here. This is 9.8 CGC copies. You can see that prices have really fluctuated even this year between $2,000 and $3,300. But what I care about is if I bought this book and wanted to invest over, say, 5 or 10 years, what has happened? Well, of course, any comic we probably show you today that's silver, bronze, or modern, if you bought it at peak of COVID prices, you are losing. That's just the fact. So we got to get past that. We're just in a kind of a recovery mode right now. But let's look at 10 years. So you can see 2016 to now, the highs, it's doubled. In low sales, it's more than doubled. And the average, it's gone up about 2.5 times. So again, thinking of our return on investment in 10 years, was that a good investment? Are we happy with that percentage? So now remember, if your book tripled in 10 years, you would have an annualized return of investment of 11%. That is considered a little bit low comparing to true success with the stock market. So we're doing okay, but we haven't broke any records. But I'd be pretty happy if we were investing a lot of books that had gone up 2.5 times. Okay, so that's that book. Let's pick another key. How about Amazing Spider-Man number 50? A lot of hype for this. First Kingpin. This book is over 60 years old now, and of course a classic cover. People always want this book. So let's do a little bit of comparison on this one. And we'll first look at the overall chart over 20 years. You can see, again, comic price is pretty steady there for the first 15 years or so. COVID hits, prices go crazy, and now it's slowly been making its decline back down. But what do we notice for prices overall? So here's all the 4.0 CGC copies, and we can see currently that it's fluctuating a lot. Average this year so far is $5.33 per copy. That's been dipping every year since COVID. But if you'd bought before COVID, you can see the book's actually made huge growth. And in high prices, it's gone up 3.5 times. So that's huge profit investment-wise. And it's also tripled average, and it's almost tripled on the lowest sales of each book. So in a 4.0 grade, which is pretty low, some people don't like to collect low grade, but the point is this book is actually paid off. Now that is for a 4.0. Let's look at a different grade. Here's the same book. These are 2.0s, quite low grade, graded good. So of course these are more affordable copies, but again, a dip since COVID, but before that, the book is actually more than tripled since 2015, and the average is 3.5 times up, and even the low is up more than triple. So this has actually been a great investment book. Now, there's something to consider that's very important. When people see that books are on a trend where they have massive growth for a decade, that is a great sign that if you had the book, you have definitely made money. But here's the catch. Most books that triple or more in a decade don't continue to do so. Sure, books like Action Comics #1, they will. Those major gold keys. But for anything in the last 50 years, it doesn't usually happen. Books kind of have phases where they're undervalued. They go up quite a bit, and then they kind of slow down again. So you got to be careful with this book because, of course, it's had a lot of hype from the Daredevil TV show, etc. And so a lot of focus on this book specifically for speculators. And yeah, speculators can make money quick, but you got to be careful. Speculator books don't usually stay hot and keep increasing year by year by year by year. So you got to be careful with a book like this. So it's shown great increases, but is it going to do that in the next 10 years? And that's the tricky part with all of this. I usually recommend people to find the books that seem to be undervalued, because most of the comic game, and this would be true for all collectibles, the things that are most likely to go up are the things that just are as kind of a deal at the moment. Okay, let's pick another book here. Just to show you a different variety of what happens when you pick rarer books. Here's Black Cat Comics #50. This is a Golden Age classic horror cover. Everybody likes this one, but good luck finding one. Now here's the trick. You look at the chart. COVID didn't hurt this book at all. You can see this book has gone constantly up. Now these are the winners, books that just never really crash. They just keep going up. So let's see what we notice. Again, here's books graded 4.5. Now, one of the things with a book this rare is you'll see there are almost no sales. So it's a free-for-all. But if there is high demand, usually records are broken because you can see that people have to fight for these. So surprisingly, there were 3 sales of this book last year. But again, with high demand, lots of interest, people decided this was a good time to sell their 3 copies. Perhaps there'll be no copies for sale this year. And so we're just going to see massive growth again, as long as demand is high. Look at this book since 2014. In overall sales, this book has gone up 10 times. That is massive, and so way better investment than probably anything you could invest in. A book that's gone up 10 times, going up 1,600 to 16,000 in 10 years. So very impressive. Let's try a modern book just to see what it's like in comparison. Edge of Spider-Verse #2, 2014, first appearance of Spider-Gwen. This is the most valuable Marvel cover A of this century. So lots of demand, but again, print run high, and pretty well everyone saved their copies. So what does that look like when we look at the chart? So here's 9.8 of Edge of Spider-Verse #2. Again, fairly steady from the day it came out. Had a lot of bumps during COVID, and of course, it's been slowly trickling down. The question is again, is it higher now than it was in 2020? Have people actually made money if you sat on this for the last 10 years? And so now we're going to do a little bit of comparison. So here's 9.8 sales for the last decade. And while you can see some crazy prices paid in 2022, so the book is way down right now. However, as a 10-year growth, you can see the average sale, 162, is now at 660. So still, even at that, people have made, that's almost quadruple. And funny, if you bought the book in 2020 and you've sat on it the last 6 years, you have not made a penny. So it's funny how, again, the cycle is going. So I really encourage people to look past the COVID era. It's just something that probably will never happen again. Yes, it scared a lot of people away for those people who paid those top prices. What we have to look at is long-term safe investments here. And you can see this book actually has been a good one. But the next 10 years, not so sure if that's going to continue because we're still technically falling, right? So it has to finally stop and then start increasing. Let's look at Star Wars #1, Cover A, the first printing from 1977. First Star Wars comic ever made. This is from Marvel Comics. So much demand for this book, which is going to be turning 50 years old soon. Let's look at the growth in a bunch of different grades here. So first of all, here's the 9.8. Best copies in the world. People paying crazy prices for this. You can see there was a bump of interest up when the new movies came out in 2015. Then it settled down. COVID skyrocketed again. It's trickling back down. But overall, it's been pretty steady just this year alone. But you can see 911 copies sold in 9.8. That is a crazy high number of books. Looking at the chart year by year, you can see that even though, again, it dipped huge from COVID 2022, but the reality is this book has almost tripled since 2016 average price. The highest sale of each year, it's only doubled. And the lowest price of each year, it's actually tripled. So that's been pretty good for a 9.8. Let's look at the book in another grade. How about 9.2? 1,549 copies sold. And this is crazy when you see the lowest price. So right now, again, lots of sales every year. The average from 2016, you can see the book has more than doubled. So not massive profit, but that's still not too bad. It's more than doubled. If you look at the lows of each year, it's actually almost tripled. And the high sales of each year, it's roughly doubled. Okay, so that's 9.2. Let's look at it in another grade. How about 8.0? 770 sales of this book. Currently at $245, but 10 years ago, $98. So 2.5 times average. In the low, it's actually tripled. In the high, it's gone up about 2.5. Not too bad. That's for an 8. That's a decent high-grade copy. Let's look at low-grade copies. Only 42 copies have sold graded 4. Of course, most people don't want a 4 of a common book like this, but still, it's got value, so people start grading the lower grades. You can see the average right now is 185, but look how low it used to be. 2016, this averaged at $28 for a copy. So this one in low grade has actually gone up over 5 times in price. So again, depending where you put your money, the low grade has been the best investment of all for Star Wars #1 in the last 10 years. But keep in mind also way less sales in low grade. All right, let's pick another interesting book. This one I didn't pick X-Men '94, which is a hype book. I wanted to pick possibly the least demanded X-Men comic, just to see what kind of interest there is, to do some comparisons. So this is a non-key, X-Men #93 from 1975, John Buscema. And let's compare what's on the census for a non-key. Well, here's the 9.8. So you can see actually not that many sales. Again, is that due to rarity or just due to low demand? It's still a fairly expensive book, though, $2,600 for the last sale. And by looking at it over the last 10 years, if we use the 2018 numbers, we can see the book's gone up over $1,000, even though this is a non-key, but it is a 9.8. So haven't doubled your money, though, on this book. Over 20 years, of course, you can see it's more than tripled. But that's considered a little slow to say you're really making money on that book specifically. Let's look at a 9.6 to compare. More sales, a little higher price. But 2016 to now, not a good investment at all. This book has actually dropped in price in the last 10 years. Average sale from $317 down to $285. So that's interesting to see. And then one final study of this book. Let's look at an 8.0. 22 sales. Still not a lot. It's not a major key. And again, a lot of people wouldn't be grading their 8s or less. This is a fairly cheap book. It's only $65 still as an 8.0. But you can see that up from $38, it hasn't doubled in 10 years. So again, if you're a completist, you want this in your collection, great. But it hasn't proven to be a good investment book. It's just a cheaper book. No major hype around that. Let's do the same thing with some Golden Age books that are not keys, but we want to see kind of what's going on. So I looked up Action Comics 128. This is the Action Comics issue that has the least copies graded on the CGC census of any of the early issues from 1949. And again, the classic 10-cent cover, football theme cover, in fact. That's kind of fun. Now, looking at our list, I'm just going to show you that there are so few sales of this book, first of all, due to rarity. And so you can see prices are all over the place. You can see that a 4.5 had sold for $617. That's higher than a 9 had sold in the past, or a 7.5 or a 6.5. What that does tell me is that prices are going up because that is one of the most recent sales. And the 3.0 is also the most recent sale. So that just shows you that with very few sales of this book, not even one copy a year, all grades combined, means that people are paying higher prices for this book. So we don't have a chart to show the growth specifically, but just seeing that those higher sales prices with modern sales have really bumped it up. And let's do that with another book. How about the rarest early Batman issue on the CGC census? Batman number 54, also from 1949. Not a major key, but still rare due to its age and still demand because it is a 1940s Batman. Okay, so let's see what we learned from that one. Well, we can see that COVID doesn't as much affect these kind of books because there's just so few sales. Only 10 sales in 20 years, showing you the true rarity of these books, even if they are major titles like Batman. Okay, so here's a chart of the last 20 years, but just looking at the last 10 years, you can see there's only been 3 sales in 10 years. Are the sales up? Well, this is for a grade of 6.0. So 10 6.0s have ever sold. In the last 10 years, though, already you can see it's more than doubled on average. It's more than doubled on the high per year. And you can definitely see the trend year by year that a book like this is moving up. So while this isn't a huge investment book, but it's pretty safe because it's a key title and it's very hard to find. Now let's compare it to a big key. How about Action Comics number 242 from 1958? This is one of the most valuable DC comics of the last 70 years. And Brainiac, first appearance here, gets even more hype than ever before. This is one of my favorite comics. I'm very sentimental to this. When I was a kid, I went into the comic shop, tried to buy the oldest Action I could, and this is the oldest one I could afford. It was $2, and I bought myself a low-grade copy when I was about 10 years old for $2. And those days are long gone, right? So let's see kind of what prices are we paying for this book lately. So here's looking at sales of 4.0s, 62 sales. And you can see this book, even though, yes, it had some bumps during COVID, this book has really had a lot of peaks in the last decade. Demand is quite high, and you can see how busy it is compared to, say, 20 years ago when it was fairly flatline. All right, so looking at 4.0s, the average now is 2430. 10 years ago, 1578. So this book, definitely moving up, but this book has not doubled in the last 10 years on average. It hasn't doubled in high. It hasn't doubled in low. So interestingly, though, this is a major key, but prices are not skyrocketing. Now, if the movie comes out or something, demand is going to push prices higher and higher. What I will say interesting about this book is this book has no high-grade copies even graded by CGC. This is one of the rarest silver or that era comic in high grade. Purple cover, it's like there's just no high grade copies. I think 8.5 might actually be the highest copy. So there you go. Anyway, it's just fun to analyze this and just compare like all these things that are happening and just see that while yes, these books all have value, but some have been moving at a faster pace than others in the last 10 years. Sometimes it depends on the title, the character, the rarity, or maybe it's just the grade. Maybe it's the amount of copies that are on the market at one time. If you watch eBay, you can definitely see how sometimes if a market is flooded, books just sit. But when all the copies sell out, that's when prices go up. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I'd love to hear some comments from you about all of this. And I'll do more of these videos in the future if you enjoy this. So thanks a lot for watching.